Good morning, everybody. Please be seated. Good morning and welcome to today's council meeting. Particular welcome to those joining online. We will take a comfort break mid-morning, late morning, I suppose, at this point. This is almost mid-morning. My hope is to be able to finish business by about 1 o'clock, and I mean all business, ideally. So I'm not expecting a need for a lunch break. Should matters go on, then we will take a lunch break around 1 o'clock. But my hope is that we will finish around then. If I can ask the clerk to confirm any apologies and take a roll call of the members joining online.
Thank you, Provost. Good morning, everyone. We have apologies from Bailey Mike Williamson, also from, at this stage, from Councillor Willie Robertson, who I believe is hoping to join the meeting shortly, but it's just running late. In terms of those members who are online, can I just ask you to confirm that you are with us online? Bailey Brock.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Morning, Scott. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Morning, present.
Thanks. And Councillor Colin Stewart.
Present.
Thank you. I think that's all members that are online, and all other members should be in the chat.
Councillor Freshwater.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Freshwater, are you online?
I have a note that he's only got a public link. I don't know whether committee services are trying to get a
Okay,
proper link to him.
we'll try and contact him and make sure he gets in online.
Okay, thank you. Committee services will help support any members who are needing to join. Councillor Peter Barrett, with a point of information.
Thanks very much, Provost. I just wanted to make the point that Councillor Robertson isn't actually running late, but is conducting a civic function at the moment and will join us as soon as possible afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much for that point of information. Whilst you're almost on your feet, as it were, I'd just like to take this opportunity to congratulate Councillor Barrett on his recent award by Perthshire Pride in support of the work that he has done over the past 6 years, I believe, as the Council's Equalities Champion. I don't know if you'd like to say a few words, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Provost. It's very kind of you to say that. I'm not entirely sure that it is my award. I was quite surprised, or in fact possibly just as surprised as you were when you received the presentation from Mauricia at the Perthshire Pride ceremony and parade on Saturday, and can I say what a fantastic and joyful and big event that was. Provost, you will recall at our last meeting that I spoke about our minority communities' need for strong, visible allies, people like us with power and status, using that privilege as a visible force for good and for greater equality and inclusion. The token of appreciation from Perthshire Pride was for the support that the council has given to the Rainbow Stickers campaign, which I hope that members are aware of. The Rainbow Stickers are a great way of demonstrating how inclusive and welcoming our city businesses are to the LGBTQI+ community, and the more stickers that are displayed in our city centre, the more welcoming and safe spaces for the LGBTQI+ community will be visible, which is really important. I'd also very much like to thank yourself, Provost, Councillors Liz Barrett, Alistair Bailey, Dave Illingworth and John Rebeck for being visible allies at Perthshire Pride. In particular, thanks to Jack Mauricia and Fiona from Perthshire Pride for their commitment to supporting the Rainbow Stickers initiatives. Special thanks to Marisa, who's pounded the streets of Perth, getting shops and businesses to sign up, doing so well that we had to get another reprint of the first 100 stickers, which were handed over at Pride. So thanks to everyone who's involved in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett, and congratulations again on your award on behalf of the Council. I'd also like to just take this other opportunity to congratulate Claire Mailer, who members will be aware was appointed last week as the new Director of Strategy, People and Resources, and Claire is here with us today. So congratulations, Claire, on your new appointment. We look forward to working with you in the future. Members, item 2 is declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest in respect of today's business? I don't see any declarations of interest. Therefore, we'll move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meetings. Can we agree minute of the council meeting of the 28th of June 2023? Thank you. And can I just remind all members to make sure your devices are muted, please? Members, item 4 is outstanding business statement. Are there any questions on the outstanding business statement? I don't see any questions. Therefore, members will be happy to note the outstanding business statement and remove completed actions. Great. Thank you. Members, item 5.1 is the motion in relation to the proposed closure of Methven branch surgery, and this is going to be moved by Councillor Drysdale. Can I invite Councillor Drysdale to move the motion?
Good morning, colleagues. This motion today asks that elected members of all political parties and of none collectively agree to unite to urge Tayside NHS Board Primary Care Services and Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership to pursue all possible avenues and work with PKC to avert the need for the Methven branch surgery of the Perth Glover Street Victoria practice to be permanently closed, and to try to avoid further potential diminution of primary health care. The consequences of the proposed closure for the 1,500 or so patients of the practice who live in and around Methven would be far-reaching, notwithstanding the promised continuing availability of home visits for housebound patients. For everyone else living in the Methven area who is a patient of the practice, it will mean either a 6-mile plus car journey, adding to the existing traffic congestion, especially at peak times, or a bus trip, together with a half-mile walk from and to the bus station either side of the appointment. Such a journey would be just an annoyance to those of us with a private car and enjoying reasonable health. But for older people, people with disabilities or mobility issues, and or those with more serious health conditions, what has to date been a short local journey now becomes a real challenge, even quite an ordeal, just to be able to receive primary health care. To add to my concerns about the likely consequences of this planned closure, there is also the significant and ongoing population growth immediately west of the current Perth City in the vicinity of Methven Village. This expansion of Perth City will obviously mean rapid growth in demand for local healthcare services, and yet here we are on the point of losing an existing surgery. We are all, of course, acutely aware of the pressures across the UK on NHS frontline staff, and of course the extremely challenging recruitment and retention picture faced by general practices all across the land. A retirement of a single GP and the practice's inability to date to recruit a direct replacement is the straw that has broken the back of the Glover Street Victoria practice and has led to this planned closure of the branch surgery at Methven. To be clear, I place no criticism whatsoever at the door of the GP partners and practice manager, whom the council leader and I met yesterday, and it was very clear to us that they are every bit as perplexed as we are on behalf of the Methven residents at the thought of this closure going ahead. However, as things stand, the partners see no alternative solution that will enable the Methven branch surgery to remain open in a safe and sustainable way. Councillors, we are also, of course, all familiar with recent similar instances at Bridge of Erne and Carse of Gowrie, where local elected members have campaigned against closures there, to date to no avail. So what can we do to try to avoid this and any future closures of valued GP surgeries? Where will be next? Primary care is so important to prevention and early treatment of health issues, and if we fail to defend the health front line, we risk poorer health outcomes for more of the population and even greater pressure being placed on our hospitals caring for those with acute or chronic conditions. In my view, we as a council need to unite and, mixing my metaphors here, put our shoulders to the wheel to stem the tide. For a start, our new local development plan absolutely must contain stronger measures than we currently have to ensure that all new major housing developments must include mandatory provision for local healthcare facilities. Without adequate assurances on this from NHS Tayside, quite simply, I believe residential development plans ought to be refused going forward, and I hope that this will come about in due course. In the meantime, though, today, as a council, I believe we must seek to draw a line in the sand here today on behalf of the people we serve. Colleagues, I am aware that just 2 months ago, the Perth and Kinross Integration Joint Board approved a strategic delivery plan where it asserted that the Health and Social Care Partnership's vision is, and I quote, of general practice and primary care at the heart of the healthcare system. People who need care should be able to access the right care at the right time, at or near home, wherever possible. I heartily agree, and I'm sure you do too, and yet here we are today, just a few weeks later, fighting against another closure. NHS Tayside is currently also refreshing its primary care strategy, and it is expected that these two bodies' strategies will align in due course. So, to conclude, if you're all with me today on this, I would ask that Council provides its unanimous endorsement through a letter jointly signed by the Leader of the Council and, on behalf of each and every political grouping, by their respective leaders, addressed to NHS Tayside Primary Care Services, the HSCP, and representatives of the Victoria practice, calling for further urgent meetings to explore all possible safe options short of complete closure of the Methven branch surgery, in the hope that this can also in due course lead to maximum collaboration among all the public bodies moving forward in order to maintain and improve the availability and accessibility of primary health care across Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. I'd like to invite Councillor Lane to second the motion.
Thank you, Provost. I don't have much to add to that. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and it's call that we all stand together to bring all these partners together in a conversation where views can be shared and we can put forward the views of our residents, which we are all elected to do. As the Deputy Leader said, we asked for a meeting with the practice manager, and 2 of the GPs were at that meeting yesterday, and they support this action to have a joint meeting. So hope everybody can support this across the chamber. Happy to second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leader. I have an amendment from Councillor David Illingworth. David Illingworth, would you like to move your amendment, please?
Can I just wait a moment? Provost, for the amendment to come up. Here it comes. Okay, the amendment will be seconded by Councillor Frank Smith, who is also a councillor for Almdon Erne ward. He had a hospital appointment this morning that he had to wait a whole year for, and he wasn't prepared to wait another year for getting an appointment. So, but he is here now, and he is ready to second. Provost, the first part of my motion refers to the significant dismay, disappointment, and anger caused by the proposal. This is the part of Councillor Drysdale's motion that he gets right, and he is right to point out the difficulties that would be caused if the surgery closed. The surgery is much loved, and 1,000 patients have used it in the last 6 years. Provost, the second part of my motion references the immense strain being put on GPs' practices by the shortage of GPs, and that is the reason for Victoria Practice seeking permission to close Medfern surgery. GP practices across Scotland and the UK are facing a double whammy of increased demand from an ageing population and the impact of lockdown on hospital waiting lists, as well as other reasons. They're also facing an extreme shortage of GPs, and that can be for a lot of reasons. Many GPs are retiring early. Many GPs are seeking to do less hours and less sessions in a week in order to maintain a proper work-life balance. The third part of my third paragraph refers to the very hard work being done by the practice, NHS Tayside, and the Health and Social Care Partnership to communicate with all the stakeholders, be they patients, the Community Council, MSPs, and even us mere local ward councillors. The practice held a meeting last week with all the ward councillors and the practice manager and all the GPs present, also MSPs, the Community Council, and other local residents were invited. In addition to that, drop-in sessions are being held at the surgery. Posters are going up asking for written or online comments, and Facebook is also being used to encourage responses to the consultation. Provost, presently, there are many conversations taking place, including the conversation that Councillor Drysdale had with the practice yesterday. And they are seeking to explore all the possible options. The options include keeping the surgery open at the current level of 20 hours per week. They include reducing the number of hours the surgery needs to stay open, introducing non-GP-led activities such as bloods and wound care, or complete closure of the surgery. All these options present huge challenges. Provost, I fail to understand how holding some kind of urgent extra super meeting that Councillor Drysdale is suggesting will add any value to the large number of conversations taking place. The issue, as he says, is due to become before the IJB in November, and it will be scrutinised fully by board members before it goes to Tayside Health Board for a final decision. Now, unless Councillors Drysdale and Lang have magic wands that can suddenly magic up trained GPs this meeting, and if they can they magic up magic GPs for Bridge of Erne and Invergary as well, please? Thank you very much. This meeting will actually not have a great deal of value. The last point of my motion refers to setting up a volunteer-led community transport group in Medfern, like Abernethy, Glenfarg and Kinross have. The practice have indicated that they would be interested in reserving sessions for Medfern patients, so a community transport group could arrange lifts for multiple patients to Glover Street for these sessions. Provost, Medfern is a fantastic community. People feel they belong and people feel they care. They have amazing organisations like the Scouts, the Parent Council, Methven Friendship Club, the Parks Committee, and I'm very much looking forward to attending Friday night's quiz night in the community centre. Whether or not the surgery closes, it's definitely worth trying to set up a transport group. So, four points to my motion. First, to note the frustration of the community at the potential loss of their beloved surgery. Secondly, to recognise the immense strain being felt by GPs across Scotland, and that is the reason for this proposal to close the surgery. Thirdly, to acknowledge the hard work already going into exploring all the possible options. And fourthly, to support setting up a community transport group in Methven. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Can I just get clarity on whether your amendment replaces the entirety of the motion or whether it is an addition to the motion?
Thank you, Provost. It is to replace the motion, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I invite Councillor Frank Smith, who is with us in the chamber, to second the motion, please?
Thank you very much, Provost. I am happy to second the motion, and as a resident of Methven and councillor for the area, feel the disappointment and frustration felt by everyone affected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Can I next invite Bailey McLaren to move a second amendment?
Thank you, Provost. I would like to propose an amendment which would be encompassing Councillor Illingworth and Smith's amendment, and that would be to replace item 4 of their proposed amendment, saying Council instructs officers to engage with any local community efforts to establish a community transport group. Calls upon the leader of the council, local members and the vice chair of Perth and Kinross Integrated Joint Board to write to the practice managers, NHS Tayside Primary Care Services and Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership to request an urgent meeting to discuss alternative options for the primary care of the 1,500 patients of the Methven branch surgery. I am recognising this is not part of the amendment, but I do recognise the concern that sits within the community, which has been fully outlined by both Councillors Drysdale and Illingworth, and therefore I propose the change to the fourth element of the amendment by Councillor Illingworth. I have emailed this over to Scott. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey McLaren. It has just been put in the chat for members' awareness. Do you have a seconder, Bailey McLaren? Councillor Peter Barrett, second.
Thanks, Provost. I think what we're attempting to do with our amendment is to chart a course that will achieve a consensus in this chamber. I think clearly there are grave concerns about what the loss of the GP practice branch in Methven will mean. I think the Conservative amendment gives too open-ended a commitment towards any community transport initiative, and I don't really think that we can support any initiative, but we can support the group to try and establish a community transport group which may improve transport links to a GP practice in Perth. There are, as we've heard, been a number of meetings between local members and council leaders with the practice. I think it's important, and I'm certainly happy to sign any letter that council agrees should be sent, but I think it's really important to get the right people round the table, and I would suggest that that involves the leader of the council's nominee to the board of NHS Tayside, and the current vice chair of the Health and Social Care Partnership Integrated Joint Board, soon to become the chair, as well as local members. So I'm not sure whether the motion and the amendment are either too prescriptive or not prescriptive enough. I think it is important to get the right people around the table to try and find a solution to this. I do think, however, that what we're talking about here is treating the symptoms of the problem and not the heart of the problem. The BMA recently described that general practice in Scotland is unravelling like a car crash in slow motion. Unfortunately, that motion seems to be speeding up rather than slowing down. A survey conducted by the BMA found that a quarter of family doctors plan to quit their practice within 2 years. And of the 850 GPs who responded to the BMA's annual wellbeing survey, just 5% said that their surgery would be sustainable in the long term, and nearly 60% said that they feared that losing just one doctor from their team would tip the practice into collapse. So there's an urgency here, there's an urgency that isn't recognised in the motion or the amendment of the Scottish Government's failure over their term of office to adequately provide the number of GPs that we need to provide health services in Scotland. And that's where the real solution to this problem is going to be found.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Members, since we've got both a first amendment and a second amendment, I've asked if committee services can email copies of those amendments to all members. I'm going to take a very short 5-minute recess just to allow that to happen so that members can then read the terms of the amendments. Do you want to wait until after? Right, okay, we'll take a point of clarification and then we'll have a quick recess while we get the information out to everyone.
Thanks. It's just to be clear of sorry, it's Bailey McLaren. I was trying to think who it was. Sorry, Bailey McLaren. Bailey McLaren and Councillor Barrett. Is there amendment to add point 4 in the new form to the motion?
I understood it to add point 4 to the first amendment. If you can switch your mic off, then Bailey McLaren can speak.
It was just because they spoke about writing a letter and signing a letter to it, so that's where I thought it was maybe point 4 was an amendment, which would then come to the motion.
I think they're trying to take a bit of what's in the motion perhaps and put it into the amendment, but I will let them explain.
Thank you, Provost. To address Councillor Lane's question, it is to replace item 4 on the first amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll just take that short recess while we wait for it to be circulated to everyone so they can read the terms, and then we will move into debate, and I have a list of councillors already looking to come in. Thank you very much for your patience, members. I'm going to, before we start taking comments, I'm going to invite Councillor Drysdale as the mover of the motion to speak to what I believe is a revised motion.
Thank you, Provost. After discussion and deliberation, we are, or I am, prepared to accept the Liberal Democrat wording into the motion.
Okay, thank you. Can I just confirm, Councillor Lane is seconder of the motion. Are you content with that?
I'm content with that, but I think Councillor Duff may have something to add to that.
I'm coming to Councillor Duff next, okay. Councillor Duff.
So it was just to be clear about the process, effectively, that Councillor Illingworth and Smith are prepared, as requested by the Lib Dems, to incorporate the change into point 4 of the Conservative amendment. And as I understand it now, Councillor Drysdale and Councillor Laying are incorporating that part of our amendment into the motion. Is that correct? Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Illingworth and Councillor Smith, can you confirm that you are content to incorporate the Liberal Democrat second amendment into your first amendment?
I'm content.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. So, members, we have now got a motion and an amendment, both of which incorporate the Liberal Democrat second amendment. So we have a revised motion and a revised amendment.
Just for clarification, the second amendment was made with reference to the first amendment, which has been incorporated. So the first amendment now stands to reflect the second amendment proposed by the Liberal Democrats. We now acknowledge that there is a willingness to accept that into the motion. However, the cleanest way to do that is to simply note that you will accept that. The position now will be, are you happy for part 4 of your amendment to be incorporated into the motion, and what's your position with the other 3 parts, or do you want the matter to now go to a vote?
Thank you. I'm content to put our part 4 into the motion and to delete 1, 2 and 3. Thank you.
Okay, so we don't have, we have a consensus here across the council. I'm now going to come to members for comments. So I have Councillor Forbes, first of all, who got in earliest.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'm really pleased to see this coming from Methven. I'm slightly disappointed that the mover and the seconder didn't do a similar thing when Invergowrie was closing. In fact, I don't remember anybody from the SNP group showing any interest in the closure at Invergowrie, but hopefully the fact that it was mentioned in Councillor Drysdale's remarks, we may get it on the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Frampton, you were second.
Thank you, Provost. I just want to clarify one thing that Councillor Illingworth had said, first of all, and that there was a meeting that was attended by us Amund and Elm councillors with the GP's practice, was with the GPs, the practice manager, a member of the Methven Community Council. It was 2 NHS representatives and only 1 MSP was present, which was Jim Fairley. No members of the public were present at this time, as the GPs held a public meeting the following evening. As one of the ward councillors for Methven, I totally agree with the motion and amendments being brought forward to council from Councillors Drysdale and Laying, and thank them for doing so. The proposed closure of the Methven practice would have a huge impact on my constituents in Methven. There are issues regarding a lack of rural bus services into Perth for the residents in Methven, as bus services are not as frequent as they are in cities. There is a lack of adequate parking space outside the Glover Street Medical Centre to accommodate patients travelling in by private car, which also goes against the Scottish Government's plan to cut 20% emissions of private car travel by 2030. For those having to use public transport to get in, many disabled and elderly patients would not manage to walk from the bus to the practice, as it is not on the bus route of buses operating from Methven to Perth. The proposed closure of the practice effectively means that patients would have to travel a 12-mile round trip to see a GP. This is not acceptable. This could cause financial hardship to individuals who don't drive and rely on public transport, that may have no option but to pay for a taxi to get to and from an appointment that would prove costly to them. It is worth noting that the NHS didn't apply itself to prevent closure of the Bridge of Erne practice for the Erne community. meaning Bridge-Avern patients were dispersed to other GP practices within Perth, of which Victoria practice in Glover Street was impacted with some of them. Surely the proposed closures of GP practices are not the answer going forward for our citizens, and a workable solution needs to be found in order to stop these closures taking place in primary care settings. The NHS must act now to do all they can to enable this practice to stay open and keep health and wellbeing services operational within the community.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Frampton. Bailey next. I think she had, yes.
Apologies, Provost. So we've been here a long time, and I fear that we've already given the manner in which we agree here to object to the closure more consideration than the NHS Tayside Board will give to the whole matter. So that's good that we're all in agreement and that we've reached this agreement. Having suffered a similar fate in my ward, as Councillor Forbes mentioned earlier, the advice I'd give to those who were in the ward affected this time is to push as soon as you can to seek out and make sure that the NHS does an evaluation of the effect on healthcare outcomes that the extra travel will have. That was the specific thing I wish I'd had when I was sat at the NHS Tayside Board meeting back in May time about Invergowrie. That hadn't been assessed and wasn't taken into consideration. In terms of the motions and the amendment, I'm very grateful to Bailey McLaren and the Liberal Democrat group for coming up with a sort of a best hits album. So I'm happy that we're going ahead with what I might call, that's what I call motions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Councillor Reid next, please.
Thank you, Provost. From what we've heard this morning, it is obvious that primary medical care is under severe pressure, as indeed is secondary care. Following the 2018 GP contract, it was health boards who became responsible for pharmacotherapy and community treatment and care services. Previously, these services had been supported in 2021, 22, 23 with a £15 million funding from the Scottish Government. Unfortunately, this funding was discontinued for this financial year without the Scottish Government giving health boards any direction regarding the provision of these services. This in turn has put significant pressures on primary care, including Medvin. Perhaps it would be appropriate to suggest that this funding is reinstated.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Shires next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'll just be echoing comments that others have made, but a plea on behalf of those of us that have been through the local development plan process and have made the call on numerous occasions for the NHS to get involved in that really important stage of planning. Thinking about Blairgowrie and Glens, the community there has grown hugely over the last 16 years, and yet the GPs and Dr. Andrew Bust is vociferous in arguing the situation that GPs find themselves in, and happens to be a GP within Blairgowrie, makes it very clear the pressure that they're under, and I do have worries about the amount of planning that is still in the process without adequate healthcare provision being in place in places like East Perthshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. I think I'd agree that Councillor Drysdale in his introduction mentioned that the shortage of GPs is not a Scottish problem, it's a UK-wide problem. And I think it's a concern for all of us. Any potential GP, for them, this creates effectively a buyer's market. The whole of the UK becomes a market for them, and they really, wherever they choose to go, they'll be snapped up straight away. It should be a concern for all of us, because sooner or later we will need a GP ourselves. There are a lot of reasons to come to Scotland. But I think a problem we have is the current fiscal policy that we operate here, and making some of our taxes the highest in the UK. Why would a potential GP come to work in Scotland and pay higher taxes than if he or she were to work elsewhere in the UK? We all agree that GPs work very, very hard, and to see more of their income being disappearing into tax must be a disincentive. This is a factor which I think we have to recognise, and it should be a concern. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. In the last 4 years, something like 25 GP practices have been lost across Scotland, virtually all due to the increasing inability for practices to recruit new doctors. Today, we are debating the situation in Medvin, but in the past, it has been Bridgeverne, Invergowrie and Blairathel. And only yesterday, I saw in the newspapers that Park Avenue Medical Practice in Dundee, with 5,000 patients, is also about to close. Make no mistake, we are in the middle of a local healthcare crisis, with our own integrated joint board announcing that almost 1/3 of all GP practices in Perth and Kinross are at a high risk of failure, with half of all GP practices at medium risk. In 2017, the Scottish Government announced that they would increase the total number of GPs by 800 in the next decade. With nearly 6 of these 10 years gone, Audit Scotland reported that the SNP Green Coalition are nowhere near meeting that target, with the headcount of GP workforce having increased by 113 in these 6 years. However, when compared to the whole-time equivalent measure, GP numbers have actually decreased by 26.4 over that period. So I'm very much afraid this isn't the last time we'll be debating GP surgery closures in Perth and Kinross. I'd like to commend my 2 councillors in the Amond and Nairn ward, David Illingworth and Frank Smith, for the work they've already undertaken on behalf of local residents in their meetings with the Medvin practice and with locals, and for trying to do everything they can to help this unfortunate situation. I'm aware of the alternatives to closure which are already being considered by the Health and Social Care Partnership, and very much hope that some solution can be found to assist the residents in Medvin to provide local GP-led healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. This is really disappointing for us all, I agree. I'd just like to point out that if it wasn't for a poorly thought through, misguided policy, offering free tuition to an absolute minimum of Scottish candidates, then perhaps we would see more homegrown talent becoming GPs. Talking from personal experience, my own daughter, one of the brightest students of her day, she wasn't invited to take part in the free tuition scheme offered by Scottish universities. She had to go to university in London, where unsurprisingly, she gained a first-class honours degree and was snapped up by Cambridge University hospitals. One of her best friends, also a straight-A student, needed to revert to nursing because she didn't use an English university contingency. We are now visibly reaping the rewards of a disaster policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Drysdale to sum up the motion.
Thank you very much, Provost. Yeah, I've listened very carefully to all of the contributions this morning, and I agree with a large number of them. And I would just like to thank members from across the chamber for their contributions this morning. It sounds like we're we're in broad agreement with. In fact, we're definitely in broad agreement with the need for this to be a line in the sand, and for every effort to be made to prevent future closures of GP surgeries across Perth and Kinross. This council is in total agreement on that, and I would like to thank everyone for that. It would be remiss of me at this point as well not to mention the work that has been undertaken by the Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership led by Jackie here, and also by the Integration Joint Board to set parameters and to set out a vision for the future with which we all agree. The whole purpose in bringing this motion to Council this morning was to shine a light on this issue loudly and clearly, and I hope that our media friends in the chamber and elsewhere will do that, because we need to get action on this to prevent future closures. So thank you for the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Members, can we agree the revised motion? Thank you, members. Item 5.2 is calling for improved financial and practical support from the UK Government to facilitate planned increases in asylum seeker dispersal to Perth and Kinross. I'm going to call on Councillor Drysdale again to move this motion.
I'm on a roll this morning. Colleagues, once again, I rise to my feet to implore that this Council unanimously supports a joint letter signed by the Leader of the Council and the leaders of all political groups represented in this chamber today, to be sent to the UK Home Secretary and Immigration Minister, deploring the current policy towards asylum seekers, urgently demanding clarity of funding and resource assistance to this local authority, urging an immediate rethink on the seriously flawed hotel maximisation policy, which I shall outline in a minute, and pressing for immediate action to tackle the huge backlog of cases to be screened. In addition, I also ask that leaders be mandated by Council to write to the Scottish Government to request that it provide urgent financial support to help bridge the gap in funding from the UK Government. On 7th of July this year, the UK Government clearly stated its policy intention to significantly and quickly reduce its reliance on what is called contingency hotel accommodation for people seeking asylum in the United Kingdom and awaiting a decision on their individual case. And yet, less than 2 months later, the opposite is happening right here, right now, as I shall explain further in a moment. Before I continue, though, I'd like to just spell out exactly what is meant by the term asylum seeker. An asylum seeker is someone who is unable to seek protection in their home country and who is claiming to be in fear of persecution on the grounds of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. Scotland welcomes these people who wish to call this nation their home, and most emphatically, the people of Perth and Kinross have a long and proud track record of embracing people and families who have arrived here from other nations of the world and integrating them into the midst of our local communities. We see it all around us. But now we must also bear witness to the arrival of significant numbers of people who are not being allowed to integrate fully into our communities, who are not able to become economically active, and yet through no fault of their own are being accommodated in 2 adjacent hotel buildings, thus placing great strain on local services, most notably primary healthcare services. Our previous motion refers. Let's not beat about the bush here. This is immigration is a matter reserved for the UK Government in Westminster, and it is their policy for dealing with asylum seekers and its consequences that is being played out across the country, including right here in Perth. So let me summarise where we are at. Since November 2021, the Station Hotel and Queen's Hotel have been used as the aforementioned contingency accommodation, housing 118 single men of 15 different nationalities, the majority in their teens or 20s. The majority have now been accommodated there for over a year, and only 4 of these 118 have so far received decisions on their asylum applications. The number of 118 is about to increase to around 250. A social housing management organisation known as Mears Group has been providing basic support on site, while PKC officers and third sector partners have provided bespoke assistance to help residents feel welcomed and to access things like English lessons, volunteering and sporting activities. Thank God for this additional support that has been provided locally. Earlier this month, the government introduced policy changes, specifically a hotel maximisation policy and a streamlined asylum process. Here in Perth, the hotel maximisation policy will result in most residents within both hotels having to share a room going forward, starting as soon as the 11th of September. This will mean loss of privacy and space, and it is not difficult to envisage additional problems that may ensue when unrelated young men of different nationalities, cultures, ethnicities and languages are forced to live cheek by jowl. Numbers are forecast to more than double, as I've said, in the weeks and months ahead. Serious concerns have been expressed to the Home Office and to mayors, both locally by PKC officers and nationally by COSLA, about this policy and its consequences as outlined above, and on local services which are extremely stretched. Shortly, the Leader of the Council, when he provides his supporting comments, will give his views on these local discussions and the degree of reassurance he has received. Something in front of me. Bear away. Meanwhile, Councillor Peter Barrett and I both contributed to the debate on this subject at COSLA Leaders last Friday, and I'm sure Peter will agree when I say that rarely has there been such a clear unanimity of views expressed against this policy from right across the spectrum of all 32 local authorities. In preparation for the rollout of room sharing, our environmental health and community safety teams, together with the Health and Social Care Partnership, Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, will continue to do all they can to ensure a healthy and safe environment for our guests. But this is clearly an additional and costly burden on PKC's limited resources. It is hoped that the aforementioned streamlined asylum process will, in the months ahead, start to clear those priority cases that are severely backlogged. But it is feared that without additional support from government, this will exacerbate pressures on housing and healthcare. Those with a negative decision on their asylum claim, therefore with no access to public funds, could also face destitution. Hopefully, many will receive positive decisions, however, on their asylum applications and will gain the right to work. The Council will obviously do its best to assist these people. Which brings me to the issue of funding for local authorities. Previous funding of £700 per person, which never did fully cover the costs, has now stopped, just as we are about to see numbers more than double. Meanwhile, an additional funding stream for those being or about to be dispersed to standalone accommodation cannot as yet be accessed by PKC at this time. Whilst this funding is reportedly under review, neither PKC nor COSLA has been able to obtain clarity or assurance from the Home Office or mayors. This situation is unsustainable. For all of the reasons I've set out, I urge members across the chamber to support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Councillor Lane, you have about 3 minutes to second the motion.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be reasonably brief. Members would see, and I'm sure have read, the elected members briefing note that came out yesterday about 24 minutes past 4, and they must have read it with quite some horror at the situation that's unfolding here. And none of this is the fault of the asylum seekers themselves, who we welcome here. It is the total disorganisation, lack of organisation that is taking place at a much higher level than we at PKC. I had a meeting not myself, but I was a part of a meeting with mayors and the Home Office representatives last week, and their lack of knowledge of Perth was amazing. Every question asked, they had no data on Perth. It related back to Glasgow. When I pointed out I was more concerned about how we at PKC can look after the asylum seekers, both when they're seeking asylum and the ones who are successful in getting their status to remain here in Perth and Kinross. No data at all. When you look at 4 cases have been resolved in the last 2 years, people staying up to 600 days without getting a decision made. It doesn't give me much faith moving forward. The Home Office representative had a lot of nice words, but when pressed about if they were commitments, not one commitment was given because she didn't have the authority to give the commitment. As leader of Perth and Kinross Council is to make sure that when this moves on, that we have enough funding and we get funding that we deserve from the UK government and others to help us provide the best of services that we can, not just for the asylum seekers, etc., but also for our own residents. And I hope that across the chamber we can agree to try and push something forward for the benefit of the residents and the asylum seekers that are within Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I'd like to call on Councillor Peter Barrett to move an amendment.
Thanks, Provost. I thought if the Councillor Drysdale was going to rise to his feet, then I should do likewise. And I hope that we can achieve the unanimity that we did with the previous item of business with the amendment that the Liberal Democrat group are putting forward. And I just hope that we can do it maybe a wee bit quicker this time. Perthshire's history of supporting refugees dates back to 1915 during the First World War, when Perth provided support and accommodation to 166 Belgian nationals as part of the humanitarian response to people fleeing the German invasion of cities like Mechelen and Antwerp. Back then, Perth and Perthshire Belgian Refugees Committee was established to raise funds to support the Belgians and to find them accommodation and work. Large houses such as Two Rose Terrace were converted into hostels for families. Single men were accommodated in St Mary's Monastery on Canoe Hill, and families were also settled in Pitlochry and Blairgowrie. Back then, committee members included the Lord Provost of Perth, Lord Mansfield, Lady Georgina Home-Drummond, and finding the refugees work to fill the labour shortages caused by the call-up of young men into the army was one of the committee's primary activities. Men back then didn't have to wait a year to qualify to work on the official shortage of labour lists as they do now. Provost, I think the motion is fine as far as it goes, but it could go a bit further and there could be a bit more detail and meat on the bones. The position regarding the UK government's intention to proceed with so-called hotel optimisation was at the time that I think the motion submitted still unclear. However, let's be clear, hotels are entirely unsuitable as long-term accommodation for people seeking sanctuary in this country, and the doubling up of men in what are already small bedrooms on their physical and mental health makes a bad situation even worse. And Provost, I would like Council to know that I am tempering my anger and criticism of the UK government in their approach to as people seeking asylum. There are real concerns that the rapid dispersal of people seeking asylum increases the likelihood for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children not being identified or properly assessed upon arrival. And secondly, with minimum health triaging and checking on arrival, there will be greater impacts and demands on local health services for which there is no funding from either government. People seeking asylum are seeking solace and a chance to rebuild. With no immediate right to work, they're unable to provide financially for themselves, unable to fill vacancies in healthcare or hospitality, and unable to give back to the country in which they have sought sanctuary. And that needs to change. Many of the single men that are accommodated in the Station and Queen's Hotel have been with us for a year, some almost 2 years. Others will soon reach the 1 year mark. It is important that we provide ESOL, that's English spoken as another language, training to these men so that we can equip them with the language, these skills that they need for specific jobs, and that requires additional funding. Provost, it's important to recognise that if the UK government introduces fast-track processes for refugees seeking asylum from certain countries, then those people will have a right not just to housing in the private sector. Our duty to provide housing and homelessness support will rightly extend to our own council housing stock too, and we must not create a two-tier allocations policy, one for people who were born here or have lived here and others who have just recently arrived. In conclusion, I welcome the good intentions of the mover and seconder of the motion. I want to thank Eric Drysdale for supporting the paper that went to COSLA leaders on Friday and from which the contents of my amendment were drawn. The amendment is intended to add specifics to the motion and, as I said previously, put flesh on its bones. Lastly, I want to thank the Equalities and Housing team members whose swift actions and concerns meant that I could get this issue on COSLA leaders' agenda, enabling all councils to express concerns to both the UK and the Scottish Government. I would urge all members of all parties to please support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett, for those measured remarks. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Willie Robertson, second.
Thank you, Provost. I'm delighted with the second the amendment put forward by Councillor Barrett. This is a very, very difficult situation that the UK is facing, and to deal with the difficulties that many of these asylum seekers have, it has to be funded properly, and we cannot do it in the cheap. Councils must be supported in the work they're doing. Everything that Councillor Drysdale and Councillor Barrett has said in their motion and amendment, I fully support, so I'm delighted to back the motion and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Drysdale, you wish to come in regards to the amendment.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I'm absolutely supportive of the comments made by Councillor Barrett and Councillor Robertson, and I have no difficulty whatsoever in incorporating the wording of their amendment into the motion, if that will assist. Whether it does assist or not, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you very much. On that basis, Councillor Barrett, your amendment is incorporated. You content to withdraw the amendment effectively?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure where the amendment has become the motion, Provost.
Effectively, yes. Can I just check Councillor Lane and Councillor Robertson are both content with that position as well?
I'm content to have the bones fleshed out further as they have been by Councillor Barrett. I think I want everyone to support this, and I think it's another way of showing that we can work collaboratively across the council. I'm not trying to say the word magic because that was giving problems earlier. So yeah, fine with that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Robertson has also indicated that he is content on that basis. Okay, I have Councillor John Rebeck wishing to make a comment.
Thank you, Provost. Although it's been touched upon by all the movers and seconders of both the motion and the amendment so far, I think it's just really important here in this chamber that we make it very clear that those who seek asylum are not the enemy of anybody in Perth and Kinross. It's the people who make them force them into a position where they leave their homes and families to seek asylum are the enemy and not the people themselves. We know that UK government's attitude and policy on asylum seeking is cruel and inhumane. Turns out it's also chaotic and disorganised as well, and I would therefore support what's been said thus far in the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reddick. Councillor Leishman, please.
Thank you very much, Provost. The last few years since the pandemic started have asked us a huge question. Basically, what kind of society are we? And we've seen wildly different answers. During COVID, people sacrificed their social life. They missed celebrating birthdays, anniversaries and Christmas with family and friends. They missed funerals of loved ones so that those with underlying health issues could stay safe. There was an outpouring of appreciation for our NHS, and we were all encouraged to #BeKind. People showed incredible solidarity, and the trade union principle of an injury to one is an injury to all. United we stand, divided we fall has never been more fitting. Organisations in my ward, like Letham for All, did so much to make sure people weren't isolated, that people weren't in danger and had their shopping delivered and making sure they had food to eat. These values and actions showed the absolute best of human nature. Now, post-pandemic, we live in the days of the Home Secretary wanting to send people who are in desperate need to a country that violated human rights, quote, on a grand scale. And the Prime Minister proudly promises to stop the boats. Those 3 words explain just how cruel this government is. Tony Benn once said, the way a government treats refugees is very instructive because it shows you how they would treat the rest of us if they thought they could get away with it. But this government think they can get away with it. They are trying to use asylum seekers as a distraction to mask the inequalities this government create. Asylum seekers aren't in Perth to steal from us. They aren't the reason we have a housing shortage. They aren't the reason pay is stalled and inflation is driving people into horrendous poverty. They aren't the reason why the NHS is defunded to the extent that nurses are having to use food banks. And they aren't the reason why shops are closed up and down Perth High Street. Workers being exploited, communities being alienated, and us having our living standards hammered aren't the work of asylum seekers. And asylum seekers certainly are not living in 5-star luxury conditions. These vulnerable people are, however, being demonised by this government. And worryingly, when looking at some of the online comments on this story of the 2 hotels that the asylum seekers are in, it shows that there are some who swallow this government's nastiness hook, line and sinker. This Tory government want us to be divided by hate. They want people to point the finger and project structural issues onto vulnerable people to distract from the social injustices inflicted upon us. That's how they win. But everybody wins when we're united in solidarity and when we link our struggles. Heartbreakingly, the topic of migration has long been a surrogate for racism. And let's be clear, not owning our own history is mirrored in our present. An anti-racist syllabus in our schools that explained the sins of empire building would be a good educational start in trying to change a myopic view of the world. I unequivocally support the Council demanding more financial and practical assistance from the UK government because the conditions people will have in the hotels aren't humane. The people in these hotels are poor, they are fleeing war or persecution in their lives. They've crossed treacherous seas, they've risked their lives to escape and get somewhere they can be safe and start again. They are human beings and no one seeks asylum without good reason. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Leishman. Bailey, please.
I should have taken Councillor Leishman up on his kind offer to let me go first because what I've got doesn't really top that. So thank you, Councillor Leishman. I fully support the amended motion, but I hope that additionally there'll be a solution found that puts this Keynesian industry, which profits from the enormous asylum backlog and the associated human suffering, to an end. Wouldn't it be better if the UK government actually invested in speeding up the processing of these asylum applications? Instead, they cast those seeking asylum as the baddies. Wouldn't it be better if the UK government stopped demonising the lawyers who give asylum seekers access to due legal process? It's despicable that the Tory government is playing the game of pretending that lawyers who are representing the people are somehow acting in a partisan manner. Hopefully things will change soon and that the real root causes of this crisis will be addressed. And I thank the mover and seconder of the motion and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Councillor John Duff, next, please.
Thank you, Provost. The motion seeks to secure additional funding for Perth and Kinross Council's caring of asylum seekers currently residing in our area. And while asylum may be a matter reserved to the UK Government, it is the Scottish Government that is responsible for devolved matters, including access to essential services like healthcare, education, justice, housing and transport, which enable the integration of refugees and asylum seekers into Scottish communities. Despite what Councillor Drysdale said in his comments, this fact is very clearly stated and accepted on the Scottish Government's own website. Therefore, I welcome Councillor Barrett's amendment based on an accepted COSLA motion, which proposes that we should correspond both with the UK Home Secretary and with the Scottish Government, requesting further financial and practical assistance. I'm sure we all understand why the UK Government is seeking to mitigate the £6 million per day, which is currently being spent in providing accommodation for upwards of 50,000 migrants in hotels across the UK. I welcome the briefing paper issued yesterday, which provides an update on people seeking asylum and the plans by the Home Office, including the streamlining of asylum applications for a number of nationalities and changes to the right to work for those who have been in the UK for over 12 months. I also note that UK funding is under review and hope that a fair remuneration for local authorities will be forthcoming, and trust that a similar outcome from the Scottish Government will also be made. I'm extremely grateful for the work of the various council departments, emergency services and partners, as set out in yesterday's elected member briefing paper, for their support in respect of both the asylum seekers and the local community. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Provost. This motion we're debating, it's just appalling. And as Council Leader commented, reading the briefing paper yesterday that arrived in our inboxes, it was shocking. So I support the motion and all activities that can be put to addressing this disgraceful situation that we're in. I mean, Councillor Allen referred to a poor policy decision when we were discussing the previous motion, and this motion sadly also is highlighting a disgraceful policy. We are seeing investment in the stacking of asylum seekers, as opposed to investing in increasing the efficiency of the processing of these asylum seekers. This is where effort should be getting concentrated. And sadly, it is these poor individuals who are suffering in so many ways. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bailey McLaren. Councillor Welch, and then I'm coming to you, Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Provost. It's just in reference from Councillor Duff to using the word migrant. Ultimately, you know, it's important to recognise that refugees are forced to flee to save their lives or preserve their freedom, and a migrant obviously has a different, if you like, description. And in the case of certainly some of the people I'm aware that are in Perth and Kinross just now, a number of these people are actually refugees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Drysdale to sum up.
Thank you, Provost, and again, thank you for all the contributions from across the chamber. As I indicated in my words, this is a UK policy playing out in Perth. There is no hiding from that. But we need a coordinated approach across both governments in order to address the consequences of this policy until the policy can be reversed. I'm pleased that it would appear that this policy is supported by Perth and Kinross Council, just as it was by the COSLA leaders last Friday, as Councillor Barrett set out in his words also. Scottish local government, Scottish local authorities strongly oppose this policy, and I'm delighted that if this council will agree that the leaders of political parties will collectively write to the Home Secretary and Immigration Minister to put forward our views and to strongly urge corrective action at the earliest possible opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Members, can we all agree the revised motion? Councillor.
Sorry, just a point of clarification into Councillor Drysdale's last comment. The amended motion is now to write to the UK Government and the Scottish Government. You just mentioned the UK Government in the summing up there.
And if I may, sorry, Provost. If I may, I accept what Councillor Duff is saying. In my speech, I did reference writing to the Scottish Government also to seek their assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, can we all agree the revised motion? Thank you. Members, move on to item 5.3, winter clothing grant for school children, and Councillor Leishman is going to move this.
Thank you, Provost McDaid. Previously, I have spoken many times about what the disastrous economic programme of austerity has done to communities from all over the UK, specifically here in Perth and Kinross. After 13 years of austerity, it's clear that it is an ideology built on sand. The cycle of household incomes being squeezed, no growth, the economy suffering, the services we rely on being cut, ultimately leads to people becoming poorer. That's the fundamental socio-economic result of austerity. And as always, those that feel its effects the sharpest are those who need help the most. Then, in the last 18 months or so, we have had an assault on working people, misleadingly labelled as the cost of living crisis. Energy bills and food prices rocket for the many. Company profits and shareholder dividends rocket for the few. If prices are soaring, but wages stay the same, then someone is making a fortune. While a new strata of society has been created, that of the in-work poor. The real truth about the cost of living crisis is that it's an attack on the living standards of working people and those in society that need help the most. It's one of the most palpable class issues there is. Councillors, in all our wards, there are residents currently living with an astonishing assortment of poverty and inequality. There are many families in Perth and Kinross who are on the brink, in an incredibly precarious position of being one piece of bad luck or one more price increase away from being plunged into disaster. We cannot be surprised at that though, because that's the reality for people that work in a low-paid economy, suffering from a gender pay gap and live in a society that has been designed by politicians to create gross inequality. This motion aims to help families that are in great need and that would benefit from help in providing winter clothing for their children and young people. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank council officers in suggesting opening up referral routes for achieving a greater reach and helping more people. The proposed sum is £20,000 and would be taken from the COVID reserve. And councillors, for background, officers have informed that there is currently a balance of £1.694 million in the COVID reserve. £12,000 has been accessed by families in need for winter clothing, and that leaves a remaining balance of £8,000 from Councillor McPherson's motion last year that I seconded. The £20,000 in this motion would be added to the remaining balance from last year to provide ongoing support. Both Councillor Rebick, as convener of Learning and Families, and myself as proposer of the motion, would monitor the uptake with officers to determine the efficacy of how people are being able to access this help and how much help Council have provided. And finally, as much as there are political differences between the administration and the Labour group, there is shared common ground. I have the utmost respect both for Councillor Lang and his administration's open door approach to discussing ways for improving things, and for the actions they have taken since May 2022 in trying to alleviate poverty in Perth and Kinross. And I hope that all political groups from across this chamber can be united behind this motion today. We may regularly disagree on how to go about things, but we all know that the only thing that really matters is making things better for people across all 12 wards. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Leishman, and Bailey to second the motion, please.
Very happy to second. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Bailey. Councillor Hearn, you have put a Q in the chat, but obviously the motion has been moved. But if you wish to ask a point of clarification, you could do so now.
Right, point of clarification, not a question. Yeah, you've put in there another £20,000 for the Financial Insecurity Fund, but in both the SNP and the Conservative budgets at the beginning of the year, we both put in £20,000 for school clothing grants specifically. My question or my clarity is, has that been used up and this is to top up that and not the Financial Insecurity Fund? Something that the Labour Party didn't put in their budget.
Do we have Nicola Sutherland?
Aye.
Hello.
Hello.
Did you?
I did. Sorry, no. There was an issue. A technical. I couldn't hear the question.
Okay, Bailey Hearn, would you like to repeat the question?
Yeah.
You could just skip the party political bit again. We'll just go to the point of the question.
Yeah, the motion it says there for 20,000 for the Financial Insecurity Fund, but in the budget there was specifically £20,000 put aside for school clothing grants. Has that been used up and this is to top up that, or is that still there and are we putting another 20,000 in the Financial Insecurity Fund to do the same thing?
Okay, so it's not the same thing. It is going to the Financial Insecurity Fund and it's for a different purpose. So the £20,000 that went to Education and Children's Services is to top up school clothing grants. Now, every family that is in receipt of a means-tested benefit doesn't have access to school clothing grants. So what this will do is this will give the opportunity to families who are working and who are in receipt of a means-tested benefit access to additional help. So it captures the people that fall between the gaps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leishman, do you wish to add anything in answer to the point of clarification?
It feels so long ago, and amongst all the hilarity and confusion, if Bailey Hearn would like to repeat it, I actually can't remember what he said.
Right, okay, thank you. Moving on. Okay, we have, trying to get caught up here, Councillor John Redbeck, you wish to comment?
I think Councillor Leader wants to make a point of clarification without putting words in his mouth at this point, maybe.
I think the Councillor Leader, okay, Councillor Wayne, you wish to move an amendment?
It's the first time I've seen it written down actually, and I've had a brief word with Councillor Leishman there. I would wonder if Councillor Leishman would consider taking the word winter clothing grant for school children out, so that the fund could be applied for people who are preschool as well. And I was wondering if he would think that was feasible.
Absolutely, Provost, yes, happy to do that.
Happy as seconder for that to happen.
Thank you, wonderful. We love the consensus. Councillor Redbeck.
Thank you, Provost. Just a very brief comment, given that Councillor Leishman mentioned me in his motion. I largely agree with what he was saying, and I'd be entirely comfortable working with him on that. And just very briefly further, if I may, and with apologies to the Chief Executive, but I often quote what he said really early on after the elections last year, that as councillors here we do face a choice often between poverty or potholes, and as I often say, I don't necessarily mean to take that literally, but this is a clear example where we are prioritising poverty, and I'm very happy to support Councillor Leishman's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Redbeck. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Leishman began his address by speaking about 13 years of austerity, and I'm tempted to speak about the spending of the previous failed Labour UK government, which brought about the need for that austerity. However, instead I will just say I'm supportive of the amended motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Leishman, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you very much, Provost. Yes, I'll be very, very brief. It's just to thank fellow councillors for passing this motion. As we have seen power become more centralised and concentrated in national government, local authorities have had their scope of influence reduced over a sustained period of time. But in passing this motion, we've certainly taken steps to make a positive contribution for local families that are in need. So thank you to my fellow councillors for that. And I suppose just finally, I shudder to think what we're going to inherit whenever the next general election comes, but we'll leave that for another time.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, can we agree the revised motion? Thank you. Right, members, move on to item 6, which is the Perth and Kinross Annual Performance Report 2022-23. And I'm going to invite Claire Mailer, the Executive Lead for Strategic Planning and Transformation, to introduce the report. Claire, do you wish to come and speak to your report?
Thank you, Provost. The report before you today is our Corporate Annual Performance Report for 2022-23. This is the first annual performance report that we have prepared following the Council's approval of the new corporate plan in December of last year. The report details performance against the indicators agreed within the corporate plan and provides an overview of the activity and progress against each of our corporate priorities. This year, based on feedback, we have included links within the report to case studies, financial information, and also included a report on how we are performing against the best value themes that are set nationally. As part of our transition to new approaches to performance reporting, moving away from a service-based approach to a wider organisational approach around our organisational priorities, we have not produced service business management and improvement plans this year. Instead, we are currently preparing a corporate delivery and improvement plan. A draft corporate delivery and improvement plan for next year for 24-25 will be presented to Council in October. It will then be finalised once the budget is set. This will help us to ensure that there is a clearer link between our improvement activities and the budget decisions. Finally, I would like to highlight that Appendix 2 provides an at-a-glance summary of the annual performance report, which again is part of our commitment to improve our public performance reporting. And in addition, we've also created a short overview video to signpost people to our performance reporting information. Again, recognising that not everyone wants to access this kind of information in the same way or indeed this level of detail. So we'll now show a short video and then I'm happy, along with colleagues across the organisation, to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for your introduction and for the video, Claire. It looks like you're getting off lightly. There's only 2 questions indicated, so Bailey first and then Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost. My question's about the table on page 41 of the document pack related to the change in the makeup of the council vehicle fleet. I noticed there that the proportion of the council's vehicle fleet that is electric vehicles has decreased by around about 30%, which is in sharp contrast to what I've observed on the roads and on dealers' forecourts, where I'd argue that perhaps the numbers have gone up while ours have gone down. My question is, there's 2 ways how that percentage can go down. One is if the overall fleet size stayed the same, but the EVs went back. The other is if the EVs were replaced by outmoded internal combustion vehicles. I'm interested in which one it is, and are there any future plans to change that trend? Thank you.
Barbara Renton.
Thank you, Provost. Bailey, in response to your question, there is a little bit more detail within the box that you refer to on the table on page 41, and it is linked to the way that we're having to replace at the moment in terms of the leasing of vehicles, and particularly around about the larger vehicles that we have for waste collection, for example. The plan is to bring a report to Climate Change and Sustainability Committee towards the tail end of this year, which will outline clearly what our EV strategy is, which is very much focused on replacing our fleet wherever we can with electric vehicles.
You have a supplementary, Bailey.
Does that mean then that we have not replaced any EVs with internal combustion vehicles? Thank you.
I don't have the answer to that question, sorry, but we can come back to you on that, Bailey.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost. Could I turn to page 72 of the overall report on community asset transfer? Because I think that's an important aspect given the review of our council property assets and our estate. That's going to be a crucial component of our transformation and change programme. Could I just ask, first of all, what accounts for, and it's a very favourable development, the near 4-fold increase in community groups supported in the asset transfer process, gone from 7 to 26. And added to that going forward, I suspect there's still a lot of community groups and community councils are not aware of what is involved. What degree of training are we in our own right providing, or in alliance with groups like COS, Community Ownership Support Scotland? So I suspect there's a lot more potential on this front yet to come. Thank you.
Fiona Robertson, please.
Councillor Donaldson, I'm not sure there's necessarily a big rationale behind the reason in the upturn in interest and requests that we've had. I think we put it down to probably community organisations coming out of COVID and regrouping and thinking, having the opportunity to think about next steps in their communities. We've also had a number, as you know, of successful asset transfers in recent years, and I think the publicity around those has hopefully encouraged other groups to come forward. Plus, it's just a much more common occurrence these days. Community asset transfers are happening across Scotland. Community groups will talk to each other. There are various umbrella networks and support groups that allow best practice, lessons learned, etc., to be shared. On your point about training, this is something that we're looking at, and I think I answered a question at Health and Social Wellbeing Committee about this recently, about training and support for community groups who want to come forward and express an interest in taking on one of the local assets across Perth and Kinross. There are also national organisations as well, and PCAVs and the third sector interface here locally who provide some of that support.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Provost. I know you're anxious to move on and finish on time. I have a quite a straightforward question, but I am going to have a follow-up, I think, to the answer, if that's okay. So my question's on page 63, and it relates to the £350,000 of investment in play parks. Can I ask how much of the 350,000 was given to us by the Scottish Government?
Barbara, are you answering this?
Yes, unfortunately, I don't have that level of detail with me quite at the moment, Councillor Forbes, but we will come back to you on that.
And do you have a follow-up, given Barbara's going to come back to you on the question?
Thanks. That kind of eliminates my follow-up. Thank you. I'll look forward to receiving that information from Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara, for helping me expediting this. Councillor Kigali.
It's more of a broad query about the way that some of this data is displayed and whether it is, going to give us the most accurate picture. So there's a couple examples here of when, in terms of the trend from before COVID to now, because we've got 4 years listed there, it claims to be an upward trend, but that is just an uptick at the end, not necessarily an upward trend across the entire thing. And just whether in the future, when we get these kind of things, we can have a bit more, a bit more clarity where it quite clearly there's an asterisk or something that says actually over the past 4 years, which is all the data displayed, it's not necessarily an upward trend. It is just an uptick in the last year.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Claire Mailer to answer.
In short, yes, we will be doing that in the future, and obviously sort of the big blip of COVID has obviously had quite an impact, so yeah, we'll incorporate that in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost. If I could add a supplementary question to Alistair Bailey's question regarding the EVs, it would be, if we're coming back to members, useful to find out what consideration was given to assessing the viability of extending the lease period of the electric vehicles that were returned instead of replacing them with internal combustion engines. My question relates to page 48 and renewable energy generation across the council estate, which has been falling by about 25% over the past 4 years. So I wanted to ask how many biomass boilers have been out of commission and how long have the 2 sites that are still offline been out of operation, and where are those sites and what is the problem?
Okay, thank you. Barbara.
Thank you, Provost. I mean, this technically is a question in relation to our own council estate, which would really be for someone from the property team to respond to. So I think we just need to come back with some of that more detailed information as well. Okay, and unless Serge, who's also in attendance at the meeting, has any information to add.
Serge, do you have any additional information?
No, sorry, I don't have that information in hand, Provost.
Okay, thank you. We will get a written answer to members on those questions. Councillor Lane has information. Councillor Lane.
Partial answer to the question, because we had a meeting about energy creation, etc., within just last week, and the problem with the biomass boilers is that they have been difficulties with their operation, and it gives me the chance to say that we cannot get parts, and it is down largely to Brexit. So that is one of the reasons why we're unable to function all the biomass boilers. But we're endeavouring to get parts across to the UK as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Braun, please.
Thanks, Provost. Back on page 41, to do with electric vehicles and the charging points, it's good to see that the number of charging points have increased by 50%. Range anxiety is one of the 2 big problems with people buying electric vehicles. I'm just wondering, do we keep a record of how many of these failed, have broken down, and how quick we repair them? Because I think one of the concerns that people have is they turn up at a charging point on the last amp in the battery and it's not working. Do we keep a record of that? And should we actually reveal that information to give extra confidence to people? How quick we repair them?
Barbara?
I'm popular this morning or this afternoon, Provost. In relation to that, I don't know whether we keep all of that detail in as much detail as that. Obviously, some are council owned and provided for. So I suspect that we have the information for that, not necessarily those in private usage. But again, the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee pre-recess took a paper outlining the plan to increase the number of EV charging points using the private sector in particular across the whole of the area to try and mitigate that anxiety in terms of distance people can go.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Forbes, the second question, then Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. Provost. It's probably clear, actually, for this one. There's reference to the 16,500 people that were helped with warm spaces, food and so on. I wonder if could just get some outline of how we measured the success of the money that we spent on that.
Thank you. We did an evaluation report in terms of towards the end of the winter, so much earlier on this year, and received feedback from the groups that were organising the warm spaces and the drop-in events, and also did some survey work. And I'm not sure if there's anybody else on the call, David Stokoe's team, but certainly the feedback, and we did include that, I recall, in an elected member briefing earlier on this year, which gave some of the more qualitative feedback in terms of the number of drop-ins, how many people attended, the connections to other services you'll see within there in terms of welfare rights. We've had quite an increased uptake in referrals and contact with welfare rights. A lot of this has been through the community connections, through the drop-ins and the warm spaces. The qualitative feedback has been overwhelmingly positive in terms of people who did drop in, not just in terms of the cosy spaces, but also in terms of the social connections that they were making. But we will continue to monitor, and I'm quite sure that that was incorporated within elected member briefing, but I'll dig that out again and recirculate it, and we will obviously do the same again during this year.
Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Provost. My question is in relation to page 40 of the pack. On the right-hand column, it talks about changes to the recycling service, which provided a recycling service to over 1,000 households who'd never previously had access to them. And just wondered if you had any idea how many households or percentage of households that still don't have access to these services.
Mark Butterworth, I believe, is on the call. He might have that detail.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I unfortunately haven't got that level of detail. The scheme which we introduced last year in the city centre increased the number of properties by, I think, around 1,000, but I haven't got the exact details, and I wouldn't want to hazard a guess, but I can certainly get that information and provide it to members.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to invite Councillor Lane to move the motion, please. Oh, I do apologise, Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost and Leader. Thank you for the report. It's quite comprehensive, and in setting it out, you've done quite a lot. But what I have noticed is that there are a lot of positives out there that far outstrip the negatives. What levels of confidence do we have that we can reverse all 12 of those reverse trends? And as a result of doing so, can we make what's a good report a fantastic report? Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously we're reporting here against our corporate priorities. Those are the priorities that the Council set in December of last year. I mentioned in my introduction that we will be bringing a corporate delivery improvement plan to Council in October, and within that plan, and officers are currently working to identify areas where we're maybe not performing quite so well, to identify improvements. So that report will set out our improvement plan for next year in terms of the actions that we will take to support better outcomes against each of these priorities. What I would point out, there are a couple, and I think you'll see within the report, some of these are within our control. There are others that very much are more in terms of our influence, and poverty and climate change are two that are extremely challenging, not just for us as an organisation, for our partners and nationally. And a lot of the work that we will be doing will be to mitigate and minimise some of the impact in these areas. But you'll see more detail in terms of the improvement actions coming forward to Council in October.
Thank you, Claire. Council Leader, could you move the motion, please?
Thanks, Provost. Provost, Baileys and fellow councillors, I'm pleased to move the Council's annual performance report for 2022 to 2023, setting out the work which has been undertaken by officers with and on behalf of the councillors, partners and local residents over the past year. This is the first report on performance against the corporate plan we agreed last December, and it gives the first opportunity to look in the round at the activity which has been taking place across the organisation to deliver on the priorities we agreed as Council. I am proud that across this chamber in December there was a unanimous backing for the corporate plan and agreement on the 7 priorities that we should focus on to deliver our ambitious vision for a Perth and Kinross where everyone can live well, free from poverty and inequalities. The scale of the challenge we set for ourselves and for officers should not be underestimated. But when the latest estimates show that almost 6,000 children across Perth and Kinross are impacted by the realities of poverty, and that issues such as inflation and associated economic challenges serve to worsen inequalities, we simply cannot lower our sights. Once again, over the past year, Council teams have continued to work together with our community planning partners and others to deliver essential services with and within our communities. Much of that work takes place behind the scenes, activity that our residents do not witness, but which they'd soon notice if it didn't happen. The size and scope of the work undertaken by our services across Perth and Kinross is significant, and neither this report nor myself can hope to do justice to it all. But I would like to take the opportunity to highlight a few specific areas as an indication of some of the achievements of this past year. To tackle poverty by funding local community groups to provide support to over 16,500 people with warm spaces, food and warm home packs in response to the cost of living crisis. Tackling climate change and supporting sustainable places by rolling out more managed approach to grass cutting to improve biodiversity. Developing a resilient, stronger and greener local economy by supporting landlords and business owners to bring empty properties back into use, such as the £1.5 million project in Perth City Centre to transform a disused commercial space and create more than 30 highly skilled jobs. Focusing on enabling all of our children and young people to achieve their full potential by reducing the poverty-related attainment gap for school leavers. External inspection of our multi-agency adult support and protection arrangements graded our strategic leadership as very effective, the only partnership in Scotland to achieve this grading, which demonstrates our commitment to protecting and caring for our most vulnerable people. Investing over £1 million in active travel infrastructure to support and promote physical and mental well-being. While working in partnership with communities underpins the work officers are doing across all of our priorities, in this year officers have also supported over 300 community groups to increase their capacity to help ensure that communities are heard and can deliver on their own local ambitions. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Chief Executive and his teams across the Council for all the work that they do on behalf of all of us in Perth and Kinross. there are still a lot of challenges ahead, and I'm sure that you, like me, will be keen to see the plans for the areas of improvement which will come to the next council in October. But in looking for what needs to be better, we can't lose sight of everything that has already been achieved. That's why I'm pleased to move this report.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Drysdale to second the report.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Councillor Peter Barrett with a comment.
Thanks, Provost. I think one of the dispiriting statistics that was in the annual performance report related to the increase in homelessness presentations in our area. We received an elected member briefing today on the excellent work of the homeless team and the efforts that they are making to try and deal with that increasing flow in an increasingly harsh economic climate situation where we have reducing numbers of affordable housing being built in Perth and Kinross, retraction in the numbers of private rented sector properties as well, and the cost of living crisis all conspiring to create a perfect storm. Yet even with that, we are still the best performing local authority when it comes to the shortest stays in temporary accommodation and the numbers of presentations as well. So although the headline figure is getting worse, I would still want to commend the homeless team on the excellent work that they are doing to try and address that. And I think as elected members, we need to look in the forthcoming budget process at what we can do additionally to deal with the increasing numbers of presentations, homeless presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'm grateful to Barbara for promising to forward on the information to me about the Scottish Government's funding for play parks, and we'll be able to decide pretty soon if the promise to renew every play park in Scotland will ever come to fruition. On my other point, Provost, I'd like to thank Claire for her full answer to that, and her and I did exchange emails some time ago about this. I'm really glad the feedback's been positive, but as she alluded to, I think the real benefit was for social connections, and I don't remember that being what we set out to achieve. When we spend public money, it's vitally important that we measure the benefits and we make sure they're in line with our priorities. In other words, we achieve what we set out to do. And on that basis, I'm just going to read you, you'll be pleased to know, a very short comment that was on the Errol Facebook page some time ago, and it says, poor Karen and Fiona are stood in the village hall staring at a plate of biscuits and just dying to pour some free cups of tea and coffee. Go and take the Wayne for a walk, or go in for your pal and get a brew and a natter in the warm space. Sponsored by your council. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor John Duff.
Thanks, Provost. I'd just like to take the opportunity not just to thank officers for the report, but for all our officers and their hard work that has gone in across the various services in Perth and Kinross to reach the high level of performance which is evident in the report. Yes, there are areas for improvement. I suppose there always will be, but I'm pleased to see that these are small in comparison. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. I have no other contributions on that topic, and therefore, Leader of the Council, do you wish to sum up at all?
No, happy to move the report.
Thank you very much. Members, can we agree the annual performance report? Thank you. Members, item 7 is the Armed Forces Covenant Progress Report, and I am going to invite Charlene Guild, Head of Innovation, to introduce the report. Sorry, Bailey Hearn. Based on the indications, it looks like most members wish a lunch break at 1 o'clock. If you can just pause a second before we begin. Okay, thank you, members. Now we've had our comfort break, we're going to resume item 7, Armed Forces Covenant Progress Report, and I'd like to invite Charlene Guild, Head of Innovation, again to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost. This report clearly sets out a range of actions and activities which have been undertaken to evidence our continued progress in relation to the Council fulfilling its commitment under the Armed Forces Covenant. Our commitment covers 3 areas. Firstly, the services we provide to members or former members of the armed forces and their families living locally. Secondly, our responsibilities as an employer to veterans, reservists and adult cadet force volunteers. Actions related to this area are included under our employer recognition scheme, and we are proud to have achieved the Gold Award standard in 2021. And finally, our civic responsibilities within this area. We have a long-standing commitment to this area of work, having first signed the Covenant in 2012. And the report outlines the infrastructure which is now in place, supported by officers across all council services and liaising closely with our armed forces and veterans champion. The main change is a new statutory duty to have due regard to the armed veterans community in relation to our housing, education and some specific health functions delegated to the Integrated Joint Board. This legal duty, sets out in the Armed Forces Act, came into force in November 2022, and one we see as a positive opportunity to enhance the status of what we already do here at Perth and Kinross. We have developed an action plan to monitor this work and ensure our commitments under the duty are evidenced along with an agreed budget to support this work. We will continue to prioritise this work within the Council and in partnership with our veterans support organisations in the area going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report? There are no questions. Thank you very much, Charlene, for the report, and to the rest of the team. I'd like to invite the Leader of the Council to move the report, please.
Thank you, Provost. This report provides members with a progress report in relation to the Council's commitment under the Armed Forces Covenant. I commend this report to members and note the positive work which continues to be undertaken to help support Armed Forces veterans and their families living in Perth and Kinross, as well as our responsibilities as an employer to support employees who are veterans, reservists and cadet force adult volunteers, for which we received the prestigious Gold Award in the Armed Forces Employer Recognition Scheme in 2021. We have a long-standing commitment to this area of work, which, as the report indicates now, has a statutory responsibility with the introduction of the new legal duty to have due regard to the Armed Forces Covenant set out in the Armed Forces Act 2021, which came into force in November 2022. I was personally pleased to commit to a working budget for this area of our work at the Council budget setting process, and I'm pleased that this report also outlines the ways in which this budget is being utilised. I would like to thank my colleague Bailey Chris Ahern for his continued dedication to his role as our Armed Forces and Veterans Champion, and along with the Provost for his leadership in terms of the range of civic duties outlined in the report, which also demonstrate our commitment to the Armed Forces community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Leader, Bailey Chris Ahern to second the report, please.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Councillor Lane. Thank you for allowing me to say words to support this paper. This paper will come to Council every year and report not just on my progress as Armed Forces Champion, but the work this Council has done in support of the Armed Forces family. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Lane and the administration for allowing me to stay on in this role following the elections last year. It is a role that I hope you have seen I take very seriously and will continue to do so. As members will know from the paper, we are a council who have signed the Armed Forces Covenant, and part of my role is to see that we adhere to that covenant. We must look after our veterans and their families, as well as current serving personnel who come from Perth and Kinross, and whose families may still be here whilst they're serving elsewhere and overseas. We have many veterans from conflicts and wars from the Second World War, although there's not so many of them left at the moment, Korea and the Middle East, Africa, to name just a few, who are in the later stages of life. But since I joined the Royal Air Force in 1982, this country and our forces have seen conflicts in the Falklands, Iraq, Afghanistan and Europe, as well as having a presence in every single continent in the world. Why do I say this? It's to highlight that personnel currently serving or have served in about the last 30 years will almost certainly have seen or be involved in at least one conflict. Unfortunately, some of those will end up with some physical or mental health issues as a result, and a lot of them are still young with the rest of their lives ahead of them. Even here in Perth and Kinross, we have an increasing number presenting with PTSD and other complex issues directly related to their service. This not just affects their lives and their ability to adjust back into civilian life, but also affects their families. It's important this council has recognised this, and we now have what I regard as a good network of officers who have responsibilities for veterans, serving personnel and their families in all our statutory services and welfare rights. We have met once and intend to meet on a regular basis to ensure that we're not just meeting our obligation under the Armed Forces Covenant, but actually making a difference for those that seek help. Another part of the Armed Forces Champion's role is to have sight of our cadet forces. We're fortunate in Perth and Kinross to have units covering all three services right across every single ward in Perth and Kinross. And I'm now in the process of visiting all those units to see what they're doing, seeing the number of cadets we have, and answer any questions on any subject. And believe me, some of those questions are quite bizarre. It's like, what's the food like? Well, how do I know? I was there in 1982. It's slightly changed since then. I would like to remind members and officers in attendance that we have a revised Veterans First Guide, and this has been distributed to all members and every council building and every service. Thanks very much. I don't think I can add any more that's in the paper. I'm quite happy to second the paper.
Thank you very much, Baillie Ahern. Do members have any comments on the report? Councillor John Duff.
Thank you, Provost. As a council, we've always been very proud of our support for the armed service veterans and becoming a Gold Ward accredited organisation, which recognises that we provide the highest standard of service. As a father of two sons who are both armed forces veterans, I know how important support can be for those who leave the armed services and return to civilian life, something which can be a very difficult and challenging transition. I welcome the administration's incorporation of our budget proposal for a small fund to support this work and can see that it is making a difference to this area of our responsibilities. I'd also like to pay tribute to Councillor Ahern's diligence and attention to duty as our Armed Forces champion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. There doesn't appear to be any other comments on this report, so I would like to just take this opportunity to pay tribute to Baillie Ahern for all his work. He does a significant amount of work in this area, and he is supported in that by the Deputy Provost as well, who also does quite a bit with our armed forces. And I have had a very privileged opportunity to work with the armed forces along with Baillie Ahern and Deputy Provost Parrott over the past year, and have met with them on numerous occasions to discuss how we as a council can have a better working relationship and do more to support our armed forces and our veterans, particularly, including through our local armed forces charities as well. So thank you very much to Baillie Ahern and Deputy Provost Parrott, and therefore members, can we agree the report? Thank you. Members, move on to item 8, which is the review of committee timetable 23 and indicative 24 timetable. Scott Henry, Democratic Services Manager, is going to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost. The Council agreed back in November of last year that we would agree a 2023 timetable, but would also review this in mid of this year. The timetable changes before you for both this year and the indicative timetable for next year is based on the principle that members previously agreed to hold council and committee and other meetings on a Mondays and Wednesdays whenever possible. in discussion with the Provost, the Leader and the Deputy Leader, some revisions are brought forward to this year's remaining dates. And as I've already said, we have an indicative timetable for next year, which to assist with the forward planning for the business of council and committee meetings. One slight change, just to clarify, in relation to the changes proposed for this year, is that the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee that is being moved from the 1st of November to the 27th of November, the start time, just to clarify, is 9:30 AM. Happy to take any questions.
Members, are there any questions on the report? You put comment in the chat, but is it a question you wanted to ask, Councillor McCall? Well, in the meantime, while you decide which one it is, Councillor Braun with a question.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. It was just bringing up on the 2024 timetable. October, we've got LRB and planning and placemaking on the same week. That could be a lot of reading to be done. And I think we had this before and we agreed to change to ensure they didn't go in the same week.
We can have a look at that to see if that would help in terms of those members that sit on both.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. It's really just about the amendments to this year. I noticed that the Joint Consultative Committee is still in on the 4th of September, but my understanding is that's moved to the 25th of September. And also, I think on the 18th of September, there is a IGB Audit and Performance Committee as well. It's not noted on there.
And yeah, in relation to the IGB, the audit and performance, because they set their own dates, they're not always included within our one. So that if you've not been told through this or through the IGB, that will remain as well. In relation to your point about the employees GCC, we'll clarify that and get back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Provost. Scott, I apologise if I've got this question completely wrong, if my memory has failed me, but was there a report due to come to June that was withdrawn, and there was a proposal, if I remember rightly, that we'd do the sort of committee meetings in the morning and the afternoon time we set aside for political group meetings? Am I right in remembering that, and can you maybe explain why that didn't happen?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Forbes. There was consultation with groups about potential changes to the timetable, and different groups fed back different feedback, as it were. There was a majority in support of maintaining the 1 PM start time on a Monday rather than moving to a 10 AM start time, and therefore that's why the indicative timetable reflects that position. Okay. There being no other, Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Provost. Can I ask what consultation has been done with the conveners of the committees themselves? Rather,
as I say, there was a version, as Provost already alluded to, there was a version of the timetable that was circulated, I think, to all group leaders previously. The revised version of the timetable, following discussion with the Provost and the Deputy Leader, I think was circulated to all groups in advance of it being issued for this meeting as well. So that hasn't, whilst we haven't directly spoken to conveners, I'm aware that all group leaders and therefore other groups have been made aware of the proposals at the various stages.
thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now invite the Deputy Leader to move the report.
Thank you, Provost. I would just like to thank and pay tribute to Scott, to Kirsten, to Lisa and to other officers for their supportive efforts in bringing together this timetable. It's a significant piece of work. There are so many competing pressures, and it's a wonder that we have something which, apart from the issues that have been raised by elected members this afternoon, seems to fit the bill and to achieve what council agreed that it wanted, which was to concentrate meetings on Mondays and Wednesdays. So without further ado, I would like to move that we adopt this, accept this report with the amendments and tweaks that have been discussed today built into the final version of the timetable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leader, to second.
Yes, thanks. I'm happy again to thank officers for their work and the elected members that have been involved in this. I think that small inconveniences to various people and fitting these into the Mondays and Wednesdays are dwarfed by the wish that we have to broaden out the pool of people who wish to stand for election. And that is the driver behind this. So a small inconvenience for us and being able to work around the meetings on the 2 days will broaden the pool. And I think that for democracy, that's what we should be aiming for. So I'm happy to move forward with the timetable as it is slated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, we have to agree. Councillor Duff, you have an amendment.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I still think there are some issues with the committee timetable that need to be sorted out, and I would just propose that we accept the timetable as it stands for 2023, but we reconstitute the governance model, which was the way in which we addressed these in the past, to look at these in the round, as you like, and come back with something that addresses the anomalies that still exist. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bailey Ahern to second.
Yeah, I'm happy to formally second.
Okay, thank you. Members, are there any comments? If there are no comments, then we will move to a vote. Okay. Sorry, yes, Mr. Leader, to sum up, but I think Bailey wishes to come in with a comment first.
Yeah, just to say that I'll be voting in favour of us getting on and agreeing this, because we've got enough in our diaries without having meetings about the timings of meetings, is my feeling. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bailey. Okay, Mr. Leader, sorry, Mr. Deputy Leader, even, do you wish to sum up?
No, other than to apologise for my omission that yourself, Provost, played a considerable role in developing this, and I would thank you for your efforts in that regard also. I have no further comments to make. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Leader. And just before I invite Scott Hendry to do that, I would actually like to just pay my tribute to Scott Hendry and his team in committee services, who do a tremendous amount all the time, but actually to pull this together is always a feat, and there is, as was mentioned, many moving parts, and they have done a great achievement in pulling this together fairly quickly as well. So thank you very much to them. Mr. Hendry, do you want to take the roll call, please?
Thank you, Provost. So, members, we have the motion before you from Councillor Drysdale, seconded by Councillor Lane, to agree the report, including the two appendices, for both 2023 and the indicative timetable for 2024. The amendment is from Councillor Duff, seconded by Bailey Ahern, to agree the proposals in the report in relation to 2023 dates, but to reconstitute the Governance Member Officer Working Group to look at further in more detail the indicative timetable for 2024. So when I ask members to vote, can they indicate if they're voting for the motion by Councillor Drysdale or the amendment by Councillor Duff? Before I just commence the vote, can I check? I know that Councillor Freshwater was having some potential issues. Are you with us, Councillor Freshwater, online and able to indicate your vote? if I'll commence the vote if Councillor Freshwater is able to either audibly give his vote or post in the chat in line with the protocol, then I'll take the vote at that point. Bailey Ahern.
Amendment.
Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Bailey.
Motion.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Amendment.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Bailey Brock.
Motion.
Councillor Carr.
Motion.
Councillor Chan.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes.
Amendment.
Councillor Frampton.
Motion.
Councillor Freshwater.
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Kogali.
Amendment.
Councillor Lane.
Motion.
Councillor Leishman.
Motion.
Councillor McPherson.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Provost.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Bailey McLaren.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Motion.
Councillor Reid.
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson.
Amendment.
Councillor Shires.
Amendment.
Councillor Smith.
Amendment.
Councillor Colin Stewart. Councillor Colin Stewart. I've had no indication that Councillor Stewart was having any technology issues, and I see no comment in the chat, so I'll move on. Councillor Grant Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Motion.
And Councillor Welsh.
Motion.
I have just noticed that Councillor Stewart did manage to indicate his vote in the chat for the motion, so I will just readjust the votes. So we therefore have 21 votes for the motion and 18 votes for the amendment, so the motion is carried.
Thank you, Scott. Members, we move on to item 9, appointments to committees and outside bodies. Are members content to agree the appointments as they are on the agenda and the order paper? Great, thank you. Members, item 10 is elected member briefing notes. Are council content to note the elected member briefing notes since the last council meeting on the 28th of June 2023? Noted, thank you. Members, item 11 is the proposed changes to Kinross Local Committee Scheme Administration. Our members can Bailey, you have a question on this?
Yes, just a brief question. My reason for asking the question is that I think this might get used as a pattern for future area committees, which I'd support. However, I note that the proposal is to reduce the quorum down to 50% of ward councillors. That would mean then the quorum would be 2, which causes some problems. I'm not about to amend this, but just interested to know whether that's motivated by any difficulty in getting 3 along to the committee. Thank you.
Mrs. Simpson's going to speak to it.
It wasn't actually instigated by the fact that there's been a problem, and all 4 councillors have attended all of the Kinross committee meetings. But one of the things that was, and it came out from a discussion on the back of the development day, a very successful development day that we did have with all the committee members, was to build into the quorum, although only elected members have the vote, was to build in an element of a minimum number of community council representatives. So although the quorum is decreased to 2 elected members, it's actually going to increase to 5, making it much more representative in terms of a quorum with 3 community councils. And there was a very strong feeling from all of the members at the development day, so it reflects that. Bailey.
Thank you. Bailey Brock, can I just clarify if you can hear us and if others can hear us online?
You can hear now, yes.
Okay, thank you. Bailey Ahern and then Councillor John Duff.
Thank you. If my recollection is right, the Kinross Local Committee was set up as a pilot, and that was to be reported back to the council in its success and to whether we agreed that it goes on as a full committee. We're asking here to change the scheme of administration and remove the words out of pilot, where we've not yet, as a council, agreed that the Kinross Local Committee is going to go ahead as a standing committee and not a pilot, and can't do so until we've had that report and voted on it.
This is someone's going to pick up the question.
I think actually the key element around that was the name change of the Kinross Local Committee to just the Kinross Committee. There will be an evaluation report coming back to Council for consideration, but at the moment the committee is funded, and on the basis that the evaluation has taken place and the development discussion around that, whilst there is a period of funding, that the Kinross Committee is now not technically in pilot mode because that work has been done, albeit it's still entirely a matter for Council to determine whether or not these committees will operate going forward. And all of that will be fed into the discussions that will be around the establishment of the other 3 pilots that are due to kick up in 2024. But there will be a paper coming back to Council around the evaluation report and the recommendations around that. It's just at the moment the committee is still now operating but is not being assessed or evaluated at this process, so technically it's out with that pilot definition.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Duff.
Okay. Sorry, Lisa, if I could go back to 1.2, which was about the quorum and 50% of the ward council and 50% of the community council members. Is that 50% of all of the community council members, or is it 50% of the community councils are represented?
It's 50% of the community council representation that is eligible for membership of the committee. So each of the community councils is allowed 1 member, which says that, so it's effectively in the case of the Kinross one, there is 6. So there has to be a minimum of 3 community councils represented.
I see that 1.1 now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, are we happy to agree the changes as outlined in the papers? Agreed. Thank you. Members, that concludes the public business for the meeting. Can I ask if the live stream can be switched off, please?